Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Anger, fear, and searching for answers. This is how best to describe the mood inside a town hall meeting between Fort Chipewyan residents and officials from Imperial Oil. News recently broke that a spill from a tar sands mine has contaminated the local ground around the mine. The question people want the company to answer is, how dangerous is this? APTN's Danielle Parody reports on whether they got their answer.
It's empty words and empty promises, just like it was when it first started.
This is the Kearl tar sands site, a massive mine with a massive problem. The tailings pond has been leaking since May 2022. On Wednesday, Imperial Oil, the mine's owners, came up to Fort Chipewyan to face the people who are afraid of what might be coming their way. Calvin Walkwin expressed his frustration about the unreported leaks.
My kids that are in the back have to live with this when the next generations adopt. Can you tell the answer? Are you a scientist? Are you a health professional? Can you tell us the cumulative effect that's going to happen to the industry and our traditional way of life?
Kearl's tailings ponds hold wastewater from its mining processes, containing dangerous levels of arsenic, dissolved metals, and hydrocarbons. The Kearl pond has been soaking into muskeg and crown lands, leaving residents concerned about the effects on fish and wildlife. The residents said they only learned about the seepage after Imperial Oil was slapped with sanctions by Alberta's energy regulators, when a second leak of 5.4 million litres, the size of 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools, escaped the pond on January 31st, 2023. The fear is that these contaminants will get into the nearby Athabasca River and flow north to the communities. Despite living just 13 kilometers from Kearl, Jean Lomecourt says she still hasn't heard about the leak firsthand. The residential school survivor is with Keepers of the Water, an Indigenous-led nonprofit based in northern Alberta. She grew up in Fort Chipewyan and attended Holy Angels Residential School for 6 years.
They haven't taken or given any consideration to give me time to voice my concerns. I was angry, I was hurt. I felt that I wasn't valued enough as a human being. I felt that I was being a target, a racist target, as our people were thrown away as if we were not worthy.
Imperial Oil's communication manager says this meeting is a first step.
There's more we need to do in terms of engaging with communities, providing information that we know they want, they need, and they should expect.
And by incident, are we referring to the leaks or the overspill?
Yeah, there were 2 separate incidents. There was the overflow. The status of that is that the ice and snow has been removed, and we're just waiting on soil samples in order to confirm that that's been cleaned up. And then the seepage as well, which we continue to work and put in place mitigation measures.
Hopefully they come back with a good plan for our community.
Do you feel more reassured?
No, not really. No commitment, so.
They never gave us answers besides, yes, it's in the water, yes, it's in the air, yes, it's in all your traditional foods.
Thank you.
So if this keeps up, we're probably going to be the first oil sands environmental refugees.
First Nations monitors are still working to confirm the extent of the leak. Imperial Oil has said that they will have a future meeting, but they have not confirmed the date. Danielle Parody, APTN National News, Fort Chipewyan, Alberta.
St. Teresa Point First Nation in northern Manitoba is taking matters into its own hands. Chief Alvin Flett says they've lost confidence in the RCMP to stop the drug crisis. And he's calling for a special coroner's inquest into the deaths of 2 young girls. APTN's Leanne Sanders reports.
We challenge both Canada and Manitoba to undertake extraordinary measures to stop and curb deaths resulting from drugs.
Chief Flett says two 14-year-old girls, Dana Shingoose and Emily Mason, who were found outside in -23 weather on March 1st, died from illicit drug use. And he said that toxicology tests and autopsies could take a year, but will do nothing to hold drug traffickers accountable. He called the lack of charges in their deaths a failure of the legal system and is demanding a police force other than the RCMP investigate.
We have strong suspicions other youth deaths may not have been investigated properly, and through such special coroner's inquest may warrant further investigation into other questionable deaths.
In the meantime, Flett says his nation is ready to enact safety and protection Indigenous laws to clamp down on drug traffickers. Flett wants the provincial government to allow First Nations to search luggage at the point of arrival at the airport.
St. Teresa Point members and non-members will be treated equally under the administration of these laws.
The Manitoba government sent a statement that said, in part, the government of Manitoba is committed to safe communities. However, the random search of luggage raises a number of complex constitutional issues that relate to privacy interests and Section 9 constitutional rights. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Being just over 14 years since a sitting U.S. president has visited Ottawa. But today, President Joe Biden dropped by Parliament Hill, where he addressed the Prime Minister, MPs, and other dignitaries inside the House of Commons. As Frater Needham explains, the visit came with some of the tightest security the city has ever seen.
Clad in yellow and black, security forces were everywhere around the parliamentary precinct. It's a far cry from when people crowded Parliament Hill when Barack Obama visited in 2009. Inside the House, President Biden stressed the long relationship and shared values of the two countries.
Where both countries build upon the nation-to-nation relationship with Native Americans and First Nations. We've both been influenced and strengthened by the contributions of generations of immigrants. We believe to our core that every single person deserves to live in dignity, safety, and rise as high as their dreams can carry them.
But this University of Ottawa professor says the strong friendship can have negative consequences when it comes to movement on Indigenous issues.
They're both countries with deep settler colonial histories and have only made superficial gestures towards hearkening back to it and making any kind of effort towards reconciliation and decolonization. So I'm sure Indigenous people don't figure too highly on the agenda between the two.
And Connor Curtis of Sierra Club Canada says although both countries talk about the urgency of addressing climate change, the U.S. and Canada continue to approve oil and gas projects.
One major area that we know is incompatible with meeting our climate targets is any further expansion of oil and gas. However, we've seen disturbing news in the United States with the approval of the Willow project in Alaska.
If anything can be taken away from this short visit, is that the two countries remain the closest of friends and the strongest of allies. But even friends sometimes disagree.
I have to say, I like your teams except the Leafs.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Time for a quick break, and then the Truth in Politics panel will take a look at the Saskatchewan First Act. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our Truth and Politics panel to analyze some of the developments affecting our communities. This week, Carrie Benjo, Negon Sinclair, and I turned our attention to some provincial legislation that purports to give far-reaching powers of exclusive jurisdiction over natural resources. Alberta and Saskatchewan have both brought in similar laws claiming to do that. Here's our discussion from earlier. Carrie Negon, great to have you with us again. It's been since last November that the Premier, Scott Moe, issued a news release saying he would be bringing in this Saskatchewan First Act to give Saskatchewan autonomy and exclusive jurisdiction over its natural resources. That's now passed. Negon, what's your reaction to this provincial legislation?
Well, what Saskatchewan's trying to do is to do an end around with the federal government, which includes the issue of First Nations rights, Indigenous and treaty rights particularly. And the problem is that when you do an end around with the Constitution, it's quite specific in Section 9122, 24, which includes First Nations lands and territories, which is a federal obligation. And what the provincial government's trying to do is to take control of lands and resources that they claim to be provincial jurisdiction, and it just won't hold up to a Supreme Court test. However, this is an attempt by the Saskatchewan government to try to extract as much natural resources without having to do adequate compensation or consultation with First Nations. Even though they say that this legislation won't step on Indigenous and treaty rights, it's impossible to imagine how this would not be. And so this is an attempt by the Saskatchewan government, much like Alberta, to try to gain a lot of favor by treating Justin Trudeau as the enemy, and First Nations get caught in the crossfire.
Kerry, this is in your backyard. We know, of course, the FSIN has opposed this legislation. What are you hearing from reaction from Indigenous peoples out there?
The Métis Nation Saskatchewan too is also opposing the legislation. They are very vocal. They were at the legislative when the act passed, and I see a lot of court action being taken. I know the Saskatchewan government is just released its budget. We have $1 billion surplus. I'm not sure how much of that money will be tied up in the court system, because the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations and Métis Nation Saskatchewan both say that they will not sit still. They will not allow this to happen. And I don't think that this act has very much to stand on. It was just, I think it's just an attempt to show that, you know, that they're fighting against the federal government, that like Nigan had said. It's just a stab at Trudeau, and First Nations and Métis people are going to be paying the biggest price for it.
Yeah, Nigan, you know, challenges in Alberta to their Sovereignty Act as well. Like you say, this isn't likely, it will head to the courts, but likely not hold up. Is this a waste of everyone's time and money here?
Well, it's what political games look like when it comes to a situation involving lands and resources. You know, in Ontario, I'm currently sitting in Toronto right now. There's conversations around what's called the Ring of Fire. Mm-hmm. And during the last provincial federal debate on healthcare, you actually heard a lot of provincial ministers come out and say to the federal government, stop putting red tape on us, stop putting limitations on us. We are our own sovereign provinces that can make our own decisions. Problem is that what they're really talking about is stop recognizing Indigenous rights, stop passing Bill C-15, which recognizes the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I hope the public understands what the provinces are trying to do, which is to abrogate and completely ignore Indigenous rights. Unfortunately, they have a template. The federal government was the one who are the best at this until very recently. And so the provinces really want to get First Nations rights out of the way. They don't want to consult appropriately. They just want to be able to create profit for their own communities. And the real problem, of course, is that this will all end up in the courts, and it will be a colossal waste of time because the provinces simply won't be able to do this legally.
Kerry, what more can First Nations, Indigenous peoples, Métis in the province do aside from taking this to the courts?
I think with upcoming elections, there's always this debate on whether Indigenous people should vote. And I think that any political organization, any political body responds to its constituents. If Indigenous people come out in record numbers and start utilizing the right to vote, I think maybe we will be taken seriously and not so easily sloughed off as our concerns don't matter. If we come out in droves and we actually are able to change who is elected in specific ridings, then I think it will send a strong message to the provincial government that we can't be silenced and ignored.
Kerry, Nigan, we'll have to leave it there. Always love to see you. Nigan, safe travels home. Have a good weekend to both of you.
Yeah,
A new episode of APTN Investigates is just minutes away. We'll speak with reporter Priscilla Wolf about it after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And you likely saw a bunch of these today. It's that time of year, and maybe you know it with all the photos that have been shared online of the Northern Lights. Our very own Charlotte Moore Jacobs was able to capture this stunning shot from Yellowknife. Thanks, Charlotte. If you get a great picture this weekend, send it to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, +6 with snow in Halifax, rain and 6 in Fredericton. -6 in Kuujjuaq, cloudy and -2 for Nain. +1 in Montreal, snow and 0 in Val-d'Or. +2 in Sault Ste. Marie, -1 with flurries in North Bay. +5 in Thunder Bay, 3 above with snow in Sioux Lookout. -5 with snow in God's Lake, 2 below in the Pas. -3 with snow in Winnipeg, flurries and 4 below in Dauphin. -5 with snow in Regina, 6 below with snow in Saskatoon. 0 in La Ronge, 20 below, and snow in Stony Rapids. Over in northern Alberta, -2 with snow in Fort McMurray, +1 and snow in Peace River. 5 above in Edmonton, +6 for Lethbridge. 8 in Vancouver, 9 in Victoria and Kamloops. +4 with snow in Prince George, 7 in Smithers. -12 in Old Crow, 3 below with snow in Whitehorse. -13 in Yellowknife, 2 below with snow in Wrigley. -16 in Sax Harbor, 13 below for Paulatuck. -19 and snow for Baker Lake and Chesterfield. -24 with snow in Resolute, 27 below in Joe Haven. For many this week marked the beginning of the spring season. From ceremonies to storytelling, communities across the country had their own way of welcoming warmer weather. Tamara Pimentel has that.
An honor song and the lighting of a pipe kick off spring equinox in Winnipeg. Despite the cold and snow, spring is here, and it's a time of renewal and change. While ceremonies like this aren't often recorded, Elder Robert Green invited APTN to capture the moment.
It's a special type of ceremony that we do at this time of the year. It's a spring equinox, and we want to acknowledge that because it's a new beginning. It's a new life ahead of us, and we're hoping that this new beginning, this new life, brings us closer to being compassionate about each other.
Further east in Burlington, Ontario, spring is celebrated with a healing walk led by Elder White Eagle.
A new season, a new beginning. Mother Earth is waking up. It's a time of prayer. It's a time of renewal. There's a lot of healing that happens in the spring, a lot of letting go, like from the winter.
The walk through Spencer Smith Park passes Indigenous artwork. 9 artists were commissioned just in time for the new season to bring representation of Métis, First Nations, and Inuit. Mohawk artist David General created his piece with the help of his daughter, meant to help revitalize the language.
I was very, very happy and very honored to be the artist that was chosen for this. One of the major things that was the attraction to the project was the identifying that language would be an excellent theme to develop imagery on. And because I have a family who's involved in the revival of Indigenous language.
And back in Winnipeg, the pipe ceremony is followed by a water ceremony and offering.
The pipe ceremony is connected with the drum, and it's connected to the water. It brings warmer weather. It brings a lot of animals out of hibernation, so it brings back a lot of life for us, and we acknowledge them because they play a very important part in our way of life and our way of living.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
APTN Investigates returns tonight with the third of a four-part series, Inside Corrections. Journalist Priscilla Wolf re-examines the story of Odelia and Nerissa Cuisance, two sisters incarcerated for a crime they say they did not commit. Priscilla joins us now to talk about the episode, The Long Road Home. Priscilla, great to have you with us. APTN has been covering this particular story since 2020. Why was it important to do another in-depth story for APTN Investigates?
Well, Dennis, I think because, our viewers as well as our reporters are so invested in this story. And, it's been such a long journey for the sisters. And, just for them to have gotten the media starting in 2020, I think that it's important that we keep telling the story and to keep it fresh in people's minds so they know what's going on right now, because we're hoping that there's going to be some kind of closure soon, and we want our viewers to be updated on what happened, what's happening, and then they'll know what's going to happen next when it happens.
Now, David Milgaard played a pivotal role in getting the media's attention on this case. What did Odelia have to say about David Milgaard?
Well, Odelia, she has a place in her heart for him. David definitely helped give her hope. When he found out about the sisters' case, he reached out to them. He, started advocating for them, introduced them to other advocates, introduced them to the media, and he helped give them hope. He used to check on them on a regular basis, and it just made Odelia and Nerissa feel like they weren't forgotten. And Odelia says that she still feels his spirit, and it's giving her hope still.
Priscilla, why has it taken so long for a decision on bail here?
That's a great question, Dennis. I think, being in the bail hearing on February 23rd and listening to the judge talk about the aftercare program or the aftercare and what the community and family and friends are doing for them and with them, I think he just really wanted all the details and to make sure that they're going to be successful. And, he looked at other cases, similar cases, and when people were, let out on bail, if they were successful in the community, I think he just really wanted to take his time because there's so many details and a long, long history.
More to the story to be told yet. Priscilla, appreciate this. Looking forward to tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
You can catch Inside Corrections, The Long Road Home, a few minutes from now following the news. And watch all the previous episodes of the four-part series so far on our website, aptnnews.ca. That is going to do it for us for this Friday. Before we go, I want to shout out to the Canadian women's curling team, skipped by Métis curler Carrie Einarson. Team Einarson qualified for the playoffs today at the Women's World Curling Championship in Sweden. They will take on Japan tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Eastern Time. I likely won't see the start of that. Good luck, ladies. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.